Let's talk about the ACT reading, prose fiction, and humanities passages, passage 1 and 3, the odd number passages. So the reading test really falls into two large categories, reference and inference. And prose fiction and humanities are on the inference side. The odd number of questions are more inference than reference. And that really matters because you're trying to find your best pathway through the test based on the vehicle you're in. Now, you're trying to find your own path, but some individuals will tell you to skip prose fiction as it is time consuming, and speed is one of the stressors of the ACT. I find, however, that most students do really well on prose fiction as it's a story. You can usually easily comprehend it. So I say don't skip it. I say do it first for most readers. Now, again, there's lots of strategies you can utilize in approaching the reading, but I've narrowed them down to three: read and answer, Google summary and answer, and map and answer. For the prose fiction and humanities, really read and answer and Google summary and answer are the two best. So the read and answer is pretty straightforward. Read the questions, answer the questions. If you are a fast, efficient reader, that's what I recommend. Don't try any strategies, just read and answer. That's what I do. However, if timing is a stressor that affects you, you may need a strategy. In that sense, Google Summary is a strategy that works really well for students who either have difficulty remembering what they just read, that happens to some of you, or who are skimming to move quickly and need to remind themselves of what they just read. You're going to underline or circle keywords and write 1 to 2 words out to the side that say, here's what you just read. So either get your copy of this passage or pause the video to read each paragraph. As you read, write 1 to 3 words to summarize what you just read. So for my first paragraph, I underlined grandfather and me because those are the characters, and I wrote grandfather made crutches. Pause, do the second paragraph before we go on. For my second paragraph, I underlined he was falling several times a day. The grandfather put rubber tips on the crutches, and he still kept falling and broke his bone. So fall, rubber by G, bone, sad face. Pause, do the next paragraph before we move on. I underlined flawed competence, right? The idea that they're not doing anything extraordinarily well. You know what to do by now. Pause, summarize the next paragraph before we move on. I wrote tennis, basketball with G. What you wrote might be different than what I wrote, but your idea is to capture what's happening in that paragraph so that you know where to look back for the answers. I'm going to go through these quickly now. I wrote big hoops for the next paragraph. I wrote sensitive feelings. The grandfather's feelings were hurt. I wrote 28 years later, the narrator's planning shelves in his office. And I wrote, he thinks he's going to mess up. I'm going to mess up just like my grandfather. This last paragraph I really broke down because it's a long paragraph. So I started with, they look okay. Then I moved into diminished excellence. They're not perfect, but nothing is. And then I put a smiley face flaw because he's happy to find out that they're flawed. Then you want to go through and answer the questions. You'll notice in the top corner, I wrote what type of question it is, a craft and structure question, because it's for a point of view question. So the passage is written from the point of view of. So it starts off by talking about the experiences of a young boy, and then it goes to 28 years later. And so it's from a boy and then a man considering incidents that illustrate a family trait, that family trait of flawed competence. So the answer is D, craft and structure, big overview type questions. Question 2 is also a craft and structure question. Which of the following describes the author's approach to presenting the story? It's really similar to the first question. He tells it from the perspective of a youth and adult, and we see that in the same place. So your answer is F. This question number 3 is a key idea and detail question. Each of the 3 projects described in the passage. So let's find the 3 projects. They first made crutches, and they had to put rubber tips on them, and then they had the tennis court to basketball, and then he's making bookshelves. Okay, so this is not antagonism. There's no antagonism there. The grandfather got hurt feelings, but it wasn't antagonistic. The narrator makes the errors the narrator makes and the disapproval they bring. It's not about disapproval. They set the stage for the Bryant family traits to merge. Absolutely, we see that at the end, right? Yes, I'm relieved. I finally am like my grandfather. So your answer is C. The boys approach to the task of converting the tennis court. Okay, well we know where that is. Reluctant, enthusiastic, apprehensive, or thrilled. I'm thinking enthusiastic until the error of his grandfather. Choice J would have said his grandfather's a poor planner, and we know that's not the case. In fact, we see that throughout, that they have attraction to making plans. Their plans just don't always turn out great. So your answer is G. Number 5 is a key ideas and details question. As he is revealed in the instant of the undertaking of the construction of the basketball court, the grandfather is characterized as. So we know where this is found. He starts with the grandfather being all in for helping and then getting his feelings hurt when the hoops are too big. So he starts by being optimistic and ends with childish defensiveness. So your answer is A. Number 6, a little bit of a tricky question. It's still a key idea in detail. The question, did you know that Bryant built his shelves so they tilt, helps establish that the narrator is anxious because. So we know that is going to be right here. It tells us where to find it, lines 65 and 66. So choice F says his coworkers have discovered, but it says in the text he imagined, so it can't be F. His coworkers resent him having a corner office. There's nothing in there about his coworkers resenting him. He fears his incompetence will be glaring and will be the object of ridicule. Absolutely, choice H. Now, this last choice is his bookshelves remind him that, like his grandfather, he cannot hide his mistakes. That's what comes out, but that's not the anxiety, right? He actually enjoys that. He's like, oh, I am like my grandfather. I will put a smiley face there to show that. Question number 7, key ideas and details. Information in the second paragraph reveals the family's response. So the grandfather made crutches and they kept falling until they put rubber tips on them so they find a working remedy. So your answer is A. Question number 8 is an integration of knowledge and ideas question. Tells you where to look, lines 36 to 46 and line 40, so we know where that is. And the grandfather says, well, they can't be made smaller. And it's an integration of knowledge because it asks us as a fact or an opinion, a claim, a conclusion. And so this is not stated, it's not a fact, they could be made smaller. It's an opinion stated by the grandfather indignantly, right? Apologetically is another way to get into this. He's not apologetic. He gets his feelings hurt and storms off like a little kid and says, I'm not going to help you make the backboards. So your answer is G. Number 9, it can be most reasonably inferred that the discovery that an error has been made in constructing the bookshelf, when we find that at the bottom, there's a flaw, I'll put the smiley face, is a source of, so it's either B or D, comfort or relief. He's not asking for help, so it's comfort because it reveals a trait he shares with his family. So the answer has to be B. In the last paragraph, a comparison is made between diminished excellent and flawed competence. And that is here. And it says diminished excellence is a condition of the world and flawed competence comes out of character. So one is based on the environment, the other is based on the individual. So the answer has to be H. So as you go through prose fiction and humanities, you have to decide, is this a passage you want to do? Most students do it. You have to decide that. And then decide what's your approach. Is Google summary a strategy that works for you? Or can you just read an answer? Remember, there's no real inference on the ACT. Everything's really supported by text, but these lean more towards storytelling, where you have to envision what's happening in your head, where passages 2 and 4 are more organized and straightforward. Your goal in practicing is to explore the strategies and find what works best for you. Remember, one of the stressors is time, so you also need to practice some of these without timing just to get comfortable answering the questions, and some of them you need to practice timed to know how long it takes you to get through a passage so you can really plan your strategy. Be sure to reach out if you have any questions.